This morning, it's a great blessing to be here with you, as it always is. And to say we enjoy being with you is an understatement. It's an enjoyment that's based in something deeper than anything would be merely fun, but it is a great pleasure to be with you. It's good to see Case and Sydney and that little baby. She doesn't like you to talk about her, though, I don't think. Is that right? Anyhow, it's good to see all of you and all the little babies. And there's a whole lot of you that a person my age considers a little baby. You might not consider yourself a little baby, but that's just the way it goes. I'd like for you to pay a little attention, as you have noted from the scripture reading, to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. You know, frequently the Christian life in Scripture is referred to as a walk. And in this passage in Hebrews chapter 12, it is referred to as a race. 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through 10, the Christian life is a walk. And then in this passage, it is referred to as a race. What is the book of Hebrews about? Well, I love to preach from Hebrews. And Hebrews is about a very challenging time in the life of the children of God. And that is that a lot of these people that this letter is written to were people of a Jewish faith before they became Christians. So these would be Hebrew Christians, in other words, Jewish Christians. The trouble was, of course, that they were being tempted to go back to Judaism. Now, we can understand the temptation. We can understand it because, quite frankly, if you grew up going to the temple and you grew up going to synagogue, and if you grew up in a situation where you had all the things that go along with the way the law of Moses was functioning at that time, there'd be things that you were familiar with. Just to imagine if you couldn't come to this place to worship, you'd miss this place, even though you know you could worship somewhere else. The fact is that these people were missing some of the things that went along with Judaism. And the other thing that they were missing was the feeling that they had that they would be part of something that was permanent and bigger, but yet they had learned that they were not, under Judaism, part of that which is permanent, bigger, more important, more significant. Instead, they were part of something that was passing away. And that was a difficult pill to swallow, difficult thing to deal with. Hebrews chapter 11, of course, are examples of faith. We learn under the new covenant, we walk by faith, not by sight. In Hebrews chapter 11, the Bible says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And in verse 6 it says, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, you've heard many lessons on Hebrews chapter 12, and on the book of Hebrews, and Hebrews chapter, all of it. Marvelous study, marvelous study. I'd like for us to think about what is dealt with here in this passage in Hebrews chapter 12 is to remember faith when days are tough. Remember faith when we have tough days. I think we all know what we're talking about. Life has elements in it that are difficult, challenging, hard. And the text here gives us a way to think about the challenges of life that will cause us, if we will rely on the things taught here, will cause us to be able to handle, to get through, to survive, and to even grow by and benefit by the challenges of tough days. Read with me, please, again, like we read before. Hebrews chapter 12, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about, circled about, with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction, the contradiction of sinners, against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your mind. Ye have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, he says, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son that he receives us. When you contemplate those words and the meaning, it becomes very much a lesson that requires maturity of a spiritual nature to accept. Please don't misunderstand. The passage says that God chastens his children. That's you and that's me. To chasten is to correct, to punish, to straighten up, to cause to experience that which is difficult. You say, well, God wouldn't do that. Our God is a loving God. Why would he do such a thing as that? Well, he does it because we require it. You and I need the chastening of God. Now, it used to be the pattern that everybody would say when we were spanking our children. Now, I realize that spanking is not exactly what is de rigueur anymore, but the fact is when we, let's say, correct our children, will that go okay? So when we correct our children, we tell them, now, this is going to hurt me more than you. Did you ever believe that? Not when I was receiving that, not in my day, but I came to understand what that meant when I had my own children, when we had ours. Why do we correct our children? Whatever means you do use to correct your children, why do we do it? It's because they need it. They need to be corrected. They need to understand that there's a right way to live and there's a wrong way to live, and there are rewards for living the right way and there's punishment for living the wrong way. And that sometimes is a difficult thing to get across to people, particularly children. My children, anyway, had a mind of their own. And they wanted to do things the way they wanted to do it. But we understand that principle. And what this passage is indicating to us is that God also uses that kind of corrective behavior. And, you know, people say, well, I don't like to think of God as doing that sort of thing. Now, I'm not talking about God correcting you in some sort of micromanaged way. In other words, he's not going to correct every step you take, but in this life, there are things that are set in place in this world that are hard, and we have to go through them. There are challenging things. I've had people that in my life that I had that died. I didn't want them to die. I've had people in my life, and I've been sick myself sometimes. Not very sick because I'm like an old bull or something. But the point is, of course, there are things that happen to us. And we have to learn from them. And so that's a principle that God has built into the reality in which we live. We do not have guaranteed for us an easy life. Now, for Christians, it's hard to accept that because we want to think, now listen, I'm a Christian, so I ought to get a pass on something. We don't get a pass. The challenges are here for us. The benefit is that God has provided for us a way to benefit, to learn, to grow closer to Him from these things. Everybody has tough days. How do we face those tough days? We realize that we have an example of Jesus Christ, according to 1 Peter, an example of everybody who's listed in Hebrews chapter 11, according to that passage. We We learn from this passage that in order to get through the challenges of life, the best way to do it is to lose the weight of sin which does so easily beset us. In other words, a lot of the trouble, the passage indicates to us that a lot of the trouble that we get into and have to experience in this life, trouble that we learn from, is because we allowed ourselves to give into a sinful activity or a sinful way of thinking. We don't need to do that. Most of the bad trouble I've ever been in my life, I brought upon myself. How about you? Would you think about that? Now, I know there's some trouble that we don't bring on ourselves, like if we have a serious illness, we have things like that. That's not brought on us, but it's actually part of the reality of our existence. And we can either learn from it and grow through it, or we can let it beat us. Usually most of us don't have much problem with fighting our own battles of physical challenges and difficulties within ourselves. It's when it happens to somebody we love, right? That's when it's the big challenge. And God knows that. But we still have to, that's chastening. Somebody says, you mean God? No, God doesn't say, okay, there's Bryce. Let's put Bryce young, strong, pretty, all that stuff. So we say, all right, or maybe we'll use all your kids, Stephanie. All right, we look at them, we say, okay, why would God afflict them with any kind of, he wouldn't, he doesn't micromanage. He doesn't say, Zoom, you're going to go through this and let's see how you make it. The stuff is, let me tell you, the stuff is built into the planet. It's on this earth. You get in an automobile, you're going to go to Nashville, you're going to go to Huntsville, you're going to wherever you're going to go. What are you doing? You're hurtling down the road. If you get on the interstate, 70, 75 miles an hour or better. I don't know how you do it, but you go down the road. What are you doing? You are allowing yourself to come right up against the laws of physics. That's life in this planet. We're walking around breathing in. What are we breathing in? Could be any kind of airborne virus. We don't know. You know, lately people have been sick for weeks and weeks and just never felt good. And what's going on? We don't know. That's life. You say, well, Lord, why are you letting this happen to us? Well, he doesn't say, all right, I'm going to let it happen to you and you and you. It's just part of being here. Because the purpose of life is not to be jolly and happy and all of that and to get through every day without any trouble. That's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to learn to rely on God, because the few years we're here are nothing compared to the time we're going to spend in heaven. The whole point is to learn enough from this existence to recognize the necessity of obeying God in every way. In verse 2, he says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. That's the purpose of this life. You have to get your attention. My grandmother Sparks was a German woman, and she had a unique way of getting your attention. And she taught it to my mother. My mother had that same unique way of getting. See, you don't get to do this today, but my mother would say, shut up, Bill. She said that a lot. And then she would whack me upside the head. And she said, now, I did that because I love you. I said, well, I'm not sure I understand that, but I did come to understand that. See, life has its lessons. How do we get through it? We look unto Jesus. And why does it say look unto Jesus? Because he endured the cross, despising the shame. I haven't resisted. I haven't had any kind of trouble like Jesus went through. I haven't had any kind of trouble that, for instance, if you read Jeremiah chapter 20 or any of those places, can you imagine? Case, if you can imagine, say there's a hole out here and it's full of mire in the bottom, and what the people are going to do is grab you up because you preach the truth and drop you in there, and you're going to sink in up to here in the mire. That's what happened to Jeremiah. He's an example of faithfulness. Now, that's not happening to me. It hadn't happened to me yet, and I hope it never happens to me because I won't like it. But see, if we let the little things that happen in our lives or the big things that happen in our lives move us away from faith in God, we've missed the chastening which God provides for us in love to us. Now, I don't enjoy going through troublesome times. We could list all sorts of things. You ever been broke? I know some of you have been broke. I don't like being broke. Ginger, you remember going down the street where they had pork chops for sale? We got 2 of them. I can eat more than 2 pork chops. Listen, all of the things that happen in life, you have to look at them as an opportunity to learn. That's what the text indicates here. He says, you have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth. That's symbolic language, but it's language that teaches something. Scourgeth every son he receives. Now that requires some maturity to understand. And so when those bad days come, and they're coming, for most of us in this room, they've already come, haven't they? As Brother Clark used to say, you can shake or nod, but haven't they? So what do? You rely on him. As he said, after all, you have not resisted unto death. Sure, life is sometimes tough. We don't have that hall pass to get through those tough days. Hard lessons from time to time. But what's on the other end of it? What's on the other end of it? Somebody says, well, I just don't know if it's all worthwhile. But isn't it? Every one of us on this planet is going to find ourselves facing the demise of our physical existence. Say, Bill, you're so cheerful today. Yes, I know. But the Lord came and gave us an example. There are countless examples in God's book of people who have been faithful facing difficulty. The entire book of Revelation is about being faithful unto death that you may receive the crown of life. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10. Oh, yes. The Bible also says in Hebrews chapter 13, let brotherly love continue. Even in the face of those kind of chastenings, let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. Remember them that are in bonds as bound with them, and them which suffer adversary, as being yourselves also in the body. He says, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Let your conversation, let your manner of life, verse 5, let your manner of life be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. This is the same God that in chapter 12 it says, I'm going to chasten you. That I chasten everybody I love. That I scourge everyone that I love. There are difficult things that we have to go through, but then God says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Let me ask you this one. Do you believe Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5? Because if you do believe that, you can go to verse 6, which says, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. You're going to have to get in the car and drive to the hospital. You're going to have to drive to the nursing home. You're going to have to walk down the street to visit somebody who's sick. You're going to find yourself in difficult times yourself. We all do. But knowing this, that the Lord said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And you look at life when it deals you a bad hand, and you say, yeah, I understand that might be coming for me, but I don't care. I'll deal with it the best I can. But the Lord said He'd be my helper. And the next verse says, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. What that verse is saying is, the Lord is our helper. Brothers and sisters, He is with us. And whatever happens in this world is going to happen. He's not going to micromanage that. He's not going to fix it so that we don't have any pain, suffering, difficulty, or trying times. But He will help us get through it. And you know who doesn't have that? Everybody who doesn't have the Lord. Everybody who's outside of Christ. People who don't have God, who aren't Christians, haven't obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ and been baptized into Christ to be raised to walk in newness of life. Folks who haven't done that haven't obeyed the pattern that's revealed in the book according to the book itself. Now, God's full of grace and mercy. I don't shortchange God's mercy and grace, but the fact is, these blessings are designed to fit the life of a child of God. Are you a child of God? Because I'm going to tell you something. It doesn't matter how good a person you are. Doesn't matter how sweet you are. Doesn't matter how pretty you are. You're still going to have trouble. And when you have trouble, you're going to need God. And you don't need Him down the street. You don't need Him around the corner. You don't need Him in the sense of, well, I meant to do something about that. You need Him to be right there with you. Right on your hip. In your heart. In your mind. And if you don't have Him, it's dumb, D-U-M-B, to do without God when you don't have to. You can obey the gospel. Believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Turn away from your sin, confess Him as the Christ, be baptized into Him to be raised to walk in newness of life. You say, can you do that? You absolutely can. This very moment. If you're outside of Christ and you don't have this kind of confidence that you can get through the trials of life, you can come this morning and obey the gospel. We'll get Case to baptize you into Christ, to be raised to walk in newness of life. And God will be with you. That doesn't mean your troubles will be over, but it means you can survive them and glorify God because of them. If you need to come to the Lord or come back to Him, would you do so? As together we stand and sing.